My sister-in-law copied every detail of my house, spent a fortune, and claimed all the credit. So I made her blow $80,000 on nothing but garbage. I never thought I'd feel such a sharp, sinking panic while standing in someone else's living room, someone I technically liked, someone I had always tried to support, but that's exactly what hit me the moment I stepped into Laura's new home. Every detail was eerily familiar. Every angle, every fixture, every color scheme pulled straight from my own house. The hallway rug, the floating shelves in the living room, the textured wallpaper in the dining area, even the exact throw pillows I had carefully selected for months, all replicated in a way that was just wrong. But worse than the imitation was the presentation. She had spent extravagantly, installed every piece in an over-the-top, flashy way. And now she was prancing around like she had invented it all. I walked slowly into the living room, forcing a polite smile, feeling my chest tighten. The chandelier above her coffee table, which I had spent weeks hunting for the perfect style, sparkled obnoxiously, drawing every eye in the room. "It looks amazing," I said carefully, trying to keep my voice neutral, as if I wasn't dying inside. Laura's face lit up with the sort of smug pride that immediately made my stomach knot. "Thanks. Isn't it incredible? I've been working so hard on making it unique, you know." She said it with a sly emphasis, as if daring me to contradict her. The room was full of friends, neighbors, and my brother Tom, who stood beaming, clearly impressed by Laura's taste. I forced a nod. "Absolutely. Very impressive." Every word tasted like ash in my mouth. I wanted to shout, to point at the walls and say, "These are my designs, my ideas, my life," but I didn't. I had learned long ago that screaming in front of an audience rarely accomplished anything besides embarrassment. I had to stay calm. I had to observe. Every smug comment, every carefully staged corner, every unnecessary golden accent was evidence. Laura had copied me, taken credit for months of my effort, and now she wanted applause for it. I clenched my fists, feeling the heat rise behind my eyes. She led the group into the kitchen, which made me stop cold. The countertops, the backsplash tiles, the placement of the fridge magnets, all my ideas, all exactly replicated, only with more expensive materials, more ostentatious finishes. Laura was laughing at some story she'd clearly rehearsed, gesturing dramatically as if she had conjured every idea herself. I watched, silent, letting the anger simmer just beneath the surface. My mind began cataloging every single item she had copied, noting which ones were replicated faithfully and which ones she had exaggerated for effect. Each piece became a mental checkmark, proof that this was deliberate, not accidental. That I caught my brother Tom's eye for a brief moment, hoping he might realize the theft, but he was too dazzled by the glittering house to notice. Laura noticed my pause, and her smile widened in that predatory way she always had when she sensed she had the upper hand. "I know it looks like a lot, but I really wanted it to feel me," she said, voice sugary and sweet, but laced with arrogance. I forced another nod. "Of course. Your touch is very bold." Bold. That was the word she used when she wanted to claim originality over someone else's careful, thoughtful design. My stomach turned as I realized that she wasn't just copying me, she was rewriting my choices, inflating them, and making me look tame by comparison. The living room tour continued, and I noticed small details that made my pulse race. The framed prints, which I had spent hours choosing for subtle balance and cohesion, were now hung in a chaotic cluster, pretending to be avant-garde. The indoor plants I had nurtured with care were replaced by identical species in oversized, ornate pots that screamed extravagance. Even the scent, she had hired a designer fragrance service to replicate the subtle ambience I had achieved naturally with candles and essential oils. I wanted to scream. I wanted to tear down the curtains, smash the chandelier, point out every single fraudulent element. But I didn't. I needed clarity. I needed a plan. Lunch was served in a dining room that mimicked my own in layout but with gold-rimmed plates and crystal goblets. She gestured toward the table as if presenting a masterpiece she had invented. "I wanted everything to have a sense of grandeur," she said, eyes sparkling with pride. "I figured since we're all family, it would be fun to show how much thought goes into these details." My fingers twitched under the table. Every word, every gesture, was a declaration of victory in her mind, a theft flaunted as originality. I let the words slide, observing, storing every sentence, every laugh, every approving nod from our guests like ammunition for what I was beginning to consider. As the lunch chatter continued, Laura spoke about the creative process, weaving in stories about her supposed inspiration. Every anecdote was a mirror of my own months of trial and error, choosing furniture, testing color palettes, sourcing unique pieces online. Each lie was calculated to make her seem inventive and sophisticated while erasing me from the narrative entirely. I felt my hands curl into fists in my lap, nails biting into my palms to keep from snapping. I could feel my pulse hammering in my temples, my jaw aching from the tension. The audacity was infuriating, but beneath it was a spark. Beneath the anger was the seed of a plan. I excused myself briefly under the pretense of grabbing water, retreating to the hallway where I could breathe and think. I pressed my back against the wall, eyes closed, and let the fury wash over me, slow and deliberate. The audacity, the hypocrisy, the sheer gall of copying someone meticulously, spending extravagantly, and claiming credit, it was almost admirable if it weren't so infuriating. But admiration was not what I felt. I felt righteous anger, tinged with strategic calculation. I could turn this. I could make her pay, not with words, but in the currency she seemed to value most. Money and social pride. I opened my eyes and looked at the framed family photos she had placed on a sideboard, one of which was nearly identical to a portrait I had commissioned, only her family replaced my own. My lips tightened, and I let a slow, dangerous smile curve. She thought she was untouchable, that she could replicate, exaggerate, and present herself as the mastermind while the original creator stood quietly in the background. But I wasn't going to remain quiet. I wasn't going to let her steal my creativity, my effort, my identity in front of friends, family, and neighbors without consequence. The plan was already forming in my mind, deliberate, meticulous, and satisfying in a way that words alone could never be. When I returned to the dining room, I smiled warmly at Laura, outwardly polite, inwardly electric with plotting. "It's really impressive, Laura," I said, letting each word carry an almost dangerous calm. She beamed, unaware of the storm she had triggered. "Thanks. I really poured myself into it." I nodded, subtly, the gears in my mind spinning. She had shown me everything, her sources, her style, her over-the-top purchases. She had flaunted the items she considered luxurious, her priorities, her spending habits, her vulnerabilities. I didn't need to investigate further. She had given me the blueprint for retribution. By the time the afternoon ended and I left her house, the rage simmering in my chest had transformed into a steady, strategic fire. This wasn't about petty jealousy. This was about justice, about making a point, about ensuring that arrogance, entitlement, and theft of effort didn't go unchecked. I had a list in my mind, a plan starting to take shape. She thought she had won. She didn't know she had just set herself up for the most satisfying lesson she could imagine. And I smiled quietly to myself, the first real satisfaction blooming inside me since the day I realized she had copied every detail of my life and dared to claim it as her own. The days after my visit to Laura's house were a strange mix of simmering anger and sharp humiliation. Everywhere I looked, on social media, in family photos, even at casual neighborhood gatherings, I saw her name attached to ideas, designs, and choices that were mine. People complimented her creativity, praised her impeccable taste, and treated her as if she had conjured every decision herself. Each comment, each like, each verbal acknowledgement felt like a small punch to my gut. I tried to smile when friends gushed about her, nodded politely, but inside, a storm was building. I found myself replaying every detail of her copied home over and over in my head, the glaringly familiar hallway rug, the floating shelves, the chandelier I had scouted for months, now installed in a way that screamed ostentatious rather than elegant. The worst was the narrative she had created around it. Laura's charm had convinced everyone, including my own brother, that she had spent weeks laboring over her design choices, carefully curating every piece. The reality, that every choice had been lifted wholesale from my house, felt like a betrayal not just of my taste, but of the integrity of my effort. I clenched my fists, imagining the audacity it must have taken to copy me so completely. Her behavior didn't stop at replication. She actively sought credit for the ideas. At the next family brunch, she casually pointed to a corner of her living room when the topic of home decor came up, saying, "I designed it myself, you know. Thought about everything from the shelves to the lighting." Everyone nodded, impressed. My stomach tightened. I wanted to speak up, to expose her blatant copying in front of everyone, but I didn't. I had learned that confrontation in public often led to defensiveness and gaslighting. Instead, I stayed calm, letting the humiliation simmer quietly beneath my skin. Each compliment she received without acknowledgement of my original ideas was a spark, feeding a fire I knew would demand reckoning. I began watching her more closely, noting her shopping habits, her favorite contractors, the stores she frequented, the designers she admired. Every Instagram post, every casual conversation, every photo she shared revealed not only her preferences but also her weaknesses. She loved flash, spectacle, and expensive statements. She bragged about splurging on marble countertops, gold-plated fixtures, and designer furniture, treating extravagance as proof of creativity. I realized that her ego was her Achilles heel. She needed validation in ways that were tangible and costly. And that vulnerability became my roadmap. The next family gathering brought another subtle jab. Laura commented on a small improvement I had made in my kitchen months prior, a minimalist lighting upgrade, and claimed, With that sly, practiced smile, that she had implemented the exact same idea weeks ago. Tom laughed along, clearly taken by her charm, while I felt a spark of rage ignite in my chest. I bit my lip to prevent a verbal explosion, forcing myself to smile politely, sip my drink, and let the comment hang in the air. But I made a mental note: every brag, every stolen idea, every inflated achievement was data. I catalogued it meticulously, every brag a piece of the puzzle I would later exploit. At home that evening, I reflected on my options. Anger alone wasn't enough. It was satisfying only in the immediate moment and often left the perpetrator unscathed. I needed leverage, a way to turn her arrogance against her. My mind raced through ideas, subtly suggesting designers. Promoting must-have, expensive items she would feel compelled to buy. Creating opportunities for her to outspend herself while thinking she was elevating her taste. The moral justification was clear: I wasn't destroying her life, I was exposing the consequences of her vanity and theft. Each idea fueled a sense of anticipation, a controlled excitement that had nothing to do with malice and everything to do with justice. I started planting seeds casually in conversation. "You know, I just found the most amazing contractor for that custom shelving idea you mentioned last week," I said innocently, during a visit. Her eyes lit up with immediate interest. "Really? Who?" she asked, leaning forward, the kind of eager attention I knew would make her vulnerable to spending impulsively. I provided a name, a website, and a few select recommendations that I had vetted specifically for style, flashiness, and over-the-top cost. She scribbled notes, complimented me for the tip, and I nodded, hiding the small smirk behind polite curiosity. Each interaction reinforced my growing confidence that she would bite. The weeks that followed were a delicate dance. I watched her replicate my suggestions with glee, bragging about the luxurious upgrades she was investing in. Marble countertops that were nearly identical to mine, designer light fixtures that were outrageously expensive, custom furniture that looked elegant but was functionally ridiculous. She bought it all. Her social media posts became a parade of excess, hashtags like #luxuryliving, #designer-dreams, #home-goals. Friends and family commented, amazed at her taste and dedication, oblivious to the fact that she had simply spent extravagantly to copy someone else. I watched it all unfold, quietly, calculating, savoring the inevitability of her eventual disappointment. Laura's arrogance made her predictable. She would call me for advice, seeking validation, and I offered just enough guidance to ensure maximum expenditure. "Oh, that chandelier is stunning. But did you consider a more dramatic style? I saw one recently that would really make the room pop," I would say casually. Her eyes would widen, excitement bubbling over. "Yes. I need it. Where can I get it?" And just like that, another $10,000, or more, was committed to the illusion of sophistication. Each purchase reinforced the plan I had meticulously crafted in my mind, a plan that would culminate in the ultimate exposure of vanity and waste. Evenings were the hardest. Watching her post photos online, reading her gushing messages to friends about her original home, felt like a small dagger in the chest. And yet, that same exposure fueled my determination. I could see exactly where her weaknesses lay: her need for validation, her compulsion to spend, her belief that aesthetics alone defined creativity. She had created a roadmap herself, with every boast and every screenshot. I simply needed to follow it, ensure the pieces fell into place, and wait for the moment she would realize she had been led, literally and figuratively, into spending a fortune on nothing substantial. By the end of the month, the plan was fully formed. I knew exactly which contractors to suggest, which overpriced accessories she would feel compelled to buy, which social influencers to mention casually to make her feel left out if she didn't splurge. Each recommendation was a calculated nudge, each offhand comment a gentle push toward financial and aesthetic excess. The fire of anger I had felt initially had matured into a calm, precise resolve. I wasn't acting out of spite, I was orchestrating justice. Letting vanity and arrogance pay their own price, and in those quiet moments, sitting alone in my perfectly curated home that she had copied, I felt a surge of anticipation. This wasn't revenge in the petty sense. It was exposure, revelation, and the satisfaction of seeing entitlement and theft meet inevitable consequences. Laura had shown me everything: her desires, her weaknesses, her pride, and now, it was simply a matter of timing. The storm was coming, and it would be spectacular. The plan began taking shape in earnest the following week. I spent hours researching the contractors, designers, and stores Laura frequented, cross-referencing her tastes with the most extravagant, overpriced options available. She thrived on indulgence. She treated ostentation as proof of creativity, and I intended to weaponize that obsession. Every new purchase she made became a breadcrumb leading me closer to the ultimate payoff. I catalogued everything meticulously: the chandeliers she admired, the marbled countertops she gushed over, the high-end decor she flaunted online. Each detail was a tool I could use, each habit a predictable lever I could pull. Laura's own words and posts were my guides. On social media, she posted endless snapshots of her home, proudly displaying every piece of furniture, every accessory, every design choice as though she had conjured it from nothing. I noticed patterns. She loved items that were shiny, novel, and, most importantly, expensive. She always sought validation, asking friends and followers for opinions on purchases, showing off new acquisitions with a mix of pride and desperation. I realized that if I subtly directed her towards certain must-have pieces, I could manipulate the trajectory of her spending without her suspecting a thing. It started with a phone call. "Laura, have you seen the new line of designer shelving at Barrington and Company? They're supposed to be the absolute pinnacle of contemporary design," I said casually, pretending to be curious rather than calculated. There was a pause on the line, then her signature excited gasp. "No. Really? I've been looking for something that screams originality but still feels sophisticated. Where can I find it?" I smiled quietly, noting the eagerness in her voice. That eagerness was my leverage. I provided the link, subtly emphasizing that this particular line was exclusive and that only a handful of homes in the country would feature it. By the end of the week, she had ordered the first $15,000 item without hesitation. Encouraged, I continued planting suggestions, each more elaborate and costly than the last. "Oh, and you must see the Lucent chandelier collection, they're revolutionary. Everyone in design circles is raving," I said in another casual conversation. Laura's response was immediate: "I need it. I can't be behind the curve." She was so predictable, her vanity and obsession with social proof driving her every action. Every recommendation I made, carefully crafted for maximum expense and minimal utility, she accepted without question. The more she flaunted her purchases, the more I knew the eventual revelation would sting. I began intertwining practicality with absurdity, carefully ensuring the items she bought were visually impressive but functionally ridiculous. A coffee table that appeared elegant in photos but collapsed under the weight of a single drink. Lighting fixtures that looked grand but required constant maintenance and bulb replacement. Decor pieces designed for style but utterly impractical in everyday use. Each suggestion was tailored to appeal to her desire for recognition and her insatiable need to outshine, while ultimately exposing the futility of her excess. Meanwhile, I continued to observe her. Laura remained oblivious to the orchestration, posting selfies with delivery crews, documenting her creative process, and seeking affirmation at every turn. Friends and family praised her taste, unaware that she was following a path I had subtly paved for her. She even called me for advice, thrilled to be sharing her selections. Each call, each question, each excited acknowledgement from her reinforced the meticulous control I had over the unfolding scenario. She was the architect of her own downfall, and I was merely guiding the blueprint. The strategy required patience. I couldn't rush it without raising suspicion. I spaced the purchases, timing each delivery to coincide with her social media updates or casual family gatherings, ensuring maximum visibility. The goal wasn't merely financial loss. It was the spectacle of her vanity colliding with reality. The eventual moment when she realized that her relentless pursuit of grandeur had led her to invest tens of thousands into impractical, even useless, items. Every transaction became part of a larger narrative. An intricate web that would ensnare her completely. I kept meticulous records, screenshots of her posts, receipts of her purchases, delivery confirmations, and even the exact words she used when gushing about her choices. Each piece of evidence would serve a dual purpose: validation of her overindulgence and proof that she had acted entirely of her own volition, seduced by the illusion of prestige. I wanted the revelation to hit with undeniable clarity: no excuses, no denials, no room for charm or deflection. The satisfaction would be in the transparency, in the collision of perception and reality. One afternoon, she called me again, practically vibrating with excitement over a new sofa she had chosen. "I went for the Astoria Luxe, aren't they supposed to be the epitome of comfort and style?" she asked breathlessly. I responded carefully, hiding my inward grin: "Absolutely, it's perfect for making a statement. Just make sure you get the matching side tables, they really complete the set." Within days, she had spent another $12,000, proudly documenting the setup on Instagram. Each tag, each photo, each boast was another thread in the tapestry of her impending reckoning. By the end of the month, I could almost feel the puzzle pieces locking into place. Laura had spent extravagantly, bought excessively, and flaunted her purchases with unrestrained pride. She had presented herself as the master designer of her own life, entirely unaware that I had nudged each choice toward maximum exposure and eventual consequence. The satisfaction was quiet but potent, a low hum of anticipation that filled my chest whenever I thought about the moment she would finally see the results. The plan was no longer theoretical, it was in motion, unstoppable, and inevitable. Evenings became the time I allowed myself to reflect and savor the process. I imagined the exact moment when Laura would realize she had spent $80,000 on items that looked impressive but delivered little else. The humiliation would be private, the lessons unmistakable. But there was more than mere revenge at play. It was justice, reassertion of boundaries, a reminder that theft of creativity, arrogance, and entitlement have consequences. Each extravagant purchase she made under my subtle guidance was a step toward balance. Toward righting a wrong she had committed with such brazen pride. By the time the month drew to a close, the trajectory was clear. Laura's home had become a monument to her vanity, her ego, and her predictable patterns of desire. She believed herself untouchable, brilliant, and supremely creative. I knew better. And soon, very soon, she would discover the painful truth of her decisions, the ultimate cost of flaunting copied brilliance as her own. I could feel the final act approaching, the moment where all patience, strategy, and careful manipulation would coalesce into a single, undeniable revelation. The stage was set, the players unaware, and the payoff was imminent. The unraveling didn't happen all at once. It started with small cracks, the kind Laura brushed off with laughter and excuses. The first was the coffee table she had proudly posted about, all sharp angles and imported stone. During a small gathering, someone set down a glass of water, and the surface buckled with a soft, sickening crack. Laura froze for half a second, then laughed too loudly, waving it off as shipping damage. I watched from across the room, my pulse steady, my face carefully neutral. Inside, something warm unfurled. A week later, she called me, her voice tight with forced cheer. "Have you ever had issues with specialty furniture?" she asked, pretending it was casual curiosity. I pictured her pacing that gleaming living room, eyes darting to every expensive surface. "Not really," I said lightly. "But ultra-modern pieces can be delicate. That's the trade-off for statement design." She hummed in agreement, reassured by my tone, unaware she was already knee-deep in the consequences. Then came the lighting. The lucent chandeliers, the ones I'd nudged her toward with careful praise, started flickering. Not just once or twice, but constantly. Electricians were called. Bills were sent. Replacement parts took weeks because of exclusive international sourcing. Laura posted less frequently now, the captions shorter, the photos more carefully cropped to hide the dark spots overhead. At a family dinner, she snapped at Tom for flipping a switch too many times. Her smile never quite reached her eyes anymore. I stayed present, supportive, exactly as she expected. "These high-end pieces can be temperamental," I told her once, gently. "But they're worth it for the look." She nodded, clinging to that justification, because the alternative was admitting she had spent tens of thousands chasing an illusion. I could almost see the internal battle playing out behind her eyes. Pride versus reality. Appearance versus function. The sofa was next. The Astoria Luxe set she'd gushed over online looked stunning in photos, all clean lines and dramatic fabric. In reality, the cushions sagged within weeks, the frame creaking ominously whenever someone sat down. Laura stopped inviting people over casually. When she did host, she hovered, correcting how guests sat, placing pillows strategically to hide flaws. "It's just very artisanal," she insisted, jaw tight, when someone commented on the discomfort. By this point, the spending had escalated into damage control. Contractors were brought back in. Designers sent invoices for adjustments. Every fix required another expensive solution, another specialized part, another consultation fee. I knew the numbers because she told me, half laughing, half panicked. "I think we're close to 80 grand now," she said one afternoon, trying to make it sound like a badge of honor. My chest buzzed with a quiet, electric satisfaction. The breaking point came during a larger family gathering, one she insisted on hosting to reclaim the narrative. She had spent days preparing, staging every corner, lighting candles to mask the faint smell of malfunctioning fixtures. People arrived, drinks were poured, and for a brief moment, she looked triumphant again. Then someone leaned against the custom shelving from Barrington and Company, and with a sharp crack, one unit pulled cleanly from the wall, sending decor crashing to the floor. The room went silent. Laura's face drained of color, her mouth opening and closing without sound. A few people rushed forward, others stepped back, shock rippling through the space. "Is everyone okay?" someone asked. Laura nodded numbly, eyes fixed on the wreckage. The shelf wasn't just damaged. It was useless, the mounting system completely inadequate. I watched her kneel slowly, hands trembling as she touched the splintered wood. Tom started asking questions then. Real ones. About costs. About quality. About why so many things seemed to be failing. Laura snapped at him, then dissolved into tears, the carefully curated image finally collapsing under the weight of reality. "I just wanted it to be perfect," she sobbed, voice cracking. I wanted it to mean something. No one spoke. The silence was heavy, undeniable. I didn't gloat. I didn't speak at all. I simply watched as the truth surfaced on its own. The expensive items weren't heirlooms or masterpieces. They were overpriced garbage, bought for status, not substance. The realization hit Laura slowly, brutally, as the evening unraveled. Guests left early. Conversations were hushed. The house felt hollow, stripped of its illusion. Later, as I helped her gather broken pieces into a box, she looked up at me, eyes red, voice barely above a whisper. I don't understand how everything went so wrong. I met her gaze steadily. Sometimes, I said gently, style without intention doesn't hold up. The words landed hard. She nodded, swallowing, the weight of $80,000 of regret settling onto her shoulders. Driving home that night, my hands were steady on the wheel. I felt no guilt, only a profound sense of balance restored. She had copied without understanding, spent without wisdom, taken credit without substance. And now, surrounded by broken shelves, flickering lights, and sagging furniture, she was forced to confront the cost of that arrogance. The justice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. It was visible in every crack, every invoice, every stunned silence left behind. The days after the spectacular collapse of Laura's meticulously copied home were surreal. I watched from a careful distance as she navigated the aftermath, the weight of reality finally settling on her like a tangible force. Calls to contractors, frantic messages to designers, and long, tense conversations with friends filled her time. The vanity and performative pride that had once defined her every move were replaced with quiet anxiety. She had spent $80,000 chasing an illusion, and the fallout was inescapable. The irony of her predicament wasn't lost on me, but I held back from gloating. The satisfaction was quiet, precise, and infinitely more powerful for being understated. I noticed subtle changes immediately. Laura no longer boasted about her home or her original designs at family gatherings. She hesitated when people complimented her taste, her smile tighter, her posture more cautious. Every interaction carried the shadow of past mistakes, and I felt a quiet, steady vindication. It wasn't about humiliation for its own sake, it was about accountability. She had taken credit for work that wasn't hers, flaunted it, and now the consequences were concrete, unavoidable, and irreversible. My children noticed it too, though in their own way. Emma commented one morning, with a mischievous sparkle in her eye, "Aunt Laura's shelves fell over again. Did you see?" And Noah laughed, recalling a broken chair he had seen in a photo. I smiled inwardly, proud that my careful orchestration had been effective without overt cruelty. The lesson had landed: vanity and imitation carry consequences, and authenticity cannot be fabricated, no matter the cost. The children's laughter, their ability to find joy and humor in the situation, underscored the moral clarity of what had unfolded. Laura eventually called me, voice tight and hesitant. I just don't understand how all of this happened. I thought I did everything right." I stayed calm, letting each word land. "You did what you thought was best for style, not function," I replied gently, "and style alone can't replace understanding, thought, and substance. That's the lesson." She was silent for a moment, then a quiet acknowledgement slipped through her words. It wasn't pride, it wasn't acceptance, it was the recognition of reality, of the tangible cost of her arrogance and carelessness. In the weeks that followed, the social fallout continued. Friends who had once praised her extravagant taste began to whisper, subtly questioning decisions and spending. The home she had flaunted as a statement of brilliance now stood as a cautionary tale, a monument to overindulgence and poor judgment. I never spoke publicly about it. The lesson had been delivered without my intervention. Justice, as I had orchestrated it, needed no amplification. The satisfaction came from witnessing the natural consequences of choices made with vanity and deceit. At home, I felt an extraordinary sense of relief. My own space, which Laura had once attempted to replicate with flamboyance, remained intact, a testament to thoughtful design, careful planning, and authenticity. I reflected on the process, not the anger that had fueled the initial plan, but the meticulous, deliberate strategy that had ensured a satisfying and moral outcome. Revenge had been an instrument of accountability, and it had worked without cruelty, without malice, and without undermining my integrity. Even family dynamics shifted subtly. Tom, who had previously been dazzled by Laura's supposed brilliance, now sought my advice more often, quietly acknowledging my insight and taste. Laura, humbled and cautious, no longer flaunted copied designs or sought to impress with expensive but hollow gestures. Boundaries had been reinforced, lessons internalized, and respect, finally, restored. I recognized the importance of patience, planning, and moral clarity in orchestrating change, an empowerment that extended far beyond mere household aesthetics. The ultimate satisfaction came quietly, in small, unspoken moments. Watching Laura navigate repairs, replacements, and refunds with slow comprehension, witnessing her realization that extravagance without thought is empty, reinforced the principle I had acted to demonstrate. The moral payoff was subtle, almost invisible, but undeniable. It was not the pleasure of witnessing failure alone. It was the reassurance that truth, patience, and strategic action could correct arrogance and theft without descending into cruelty for cruelty's sake. I reflected on the journey from initial shock to final resolution. Anger had been the spark, but patience and planning had guided the fire to a controlled, purposeful burn. Observing, calculating, and orchestrating had allowed me to assert agency, maintain dignity, and protect the integrity of my creative work. Laura had been given the opportunity to correct course at any moment, yet her vanity made her complicit in her own downfall. The lessons had landed without public spectacle, without humiliation beyond what her choices naturally demanded. By the time a new month began, life had settled into a quieter, healthier rhythm. The children were secure, laughter returned to family gatherings, and the shadow of Laura's extravagance no longer loomed. I felt a steady, deep pride, not in the act of revenge itself, but in the clarity of purpose that had guided it. The boundary I had established around my creativity and my home had been respected in the aftermath. And the message had been delivered unmistakably: theft of effort and arrogance have consequences. And justice, when applied wisely, is both satisfying and moral. Looking back, I understood that this experience had reshaped my perspective. Anger, when channeled with intelligence and patience, becomes strategy. Pride, when paired with ethical precision, reinforces boundaries and asserts respect. The satisfaction I felt was not fleeting or petty. It was enduring, rooted in moral clarity, thoughtful action, and the protection of what was mine. Laura had been humbled, lessons learned, and my family's integrity preserved. The house, the children, the respect, all of it remained intact, untarnished, and deserved. Even now, when I walk through my home, I smile quietly at the memory of the week when Laura's arrogance collided with reality. Each piece of furniture, each carefully curated detail, each choice I had made and protected stands as a testament not just to taste, but to strategy, patience, and moral authority. I had transformed humiliation into empowerment, theft into clarity, and jealousy into justice. It was a lesson I would never forget, and one Laura would carry, painfully, for the rest of her ostentatious, overly expensive life.